Okay. Page 281. We're going to begin with the second chapter, Ice Bays 281. The question, we basically had one large question that took a page and took 2.5 pages almost. Good morning, Baruch. So the question is, the Mishnah says, Eze derech Rabi oimei derech yavar le'odem kol she'isferes le'sev v'sferes m'na'odem. What's the best path to choose? Something that makes Hashem beautiful. It's beautiful to God and beautiful to mankind. So the question of the Rebbe Shmuel is, what's the Chiddush here? But the Rebbe, in typical Chabad Chasidus philosophy, really opened it up as we learned the last few shiurim. So now we continue. Beis. The idea is the Hineksiv. It says, Eile ha'edus ha'chukim ba'mishpatim. These are the testimonies, the statutes, and the laws. The chlolos ha'mitzvahs, overall, generally speaking, mitzvahs, kulon nechlokos, are generally divided b'shalish chalukos into 3 groups. Shehein, and they are, number 1, edus, testimonies, mitzvahs that are testimonial of an event, a historical event such as Sukkot, Pesach, etc. Chukim are statutes. There's such mitzvahs that don't have reasoning given in the Torah, i.e. paraduma, shatnez, etc. And finally, the third group of mitzvahs are mishpatim, laws, which are, which would stand up in a civil court because they're logical, with explanations to justify whatever the law is. So we have 3 groups within mitzvahs. Shehen shtei chalukas kailos. The Rebbe says these 2 groups could be divided into 2 general categories. Chalokah achas, one division, hein ha-mitzvah sheyesh alein tam. They are those mitzvahs that have reasoning supporting the mitzvah. The chalokah shniya, and the second division, are mitzvahs, heina mitzvahs, she'ein aleim tam, that they don't have reasoning. And he explains, the edus u'mishpatim, the mitzvahs that we call testimony, edus and mishpatim, and law, hey mitzvah sheyesh aleim tam, they are mitzvahs that have reasoning associated with them. Ve'einon elazeh shein chalukas b'tameihem. The difference between the 2 consists only of the reasoning, the ta'amim, the reasoning for the mitzvah. So, for example, why do we celebrate Pesach? Because Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. That's a logical reason, right? The Havdil, July 4th, or whatever the historical event that one celebrates in their country, right? There's a reason for it, an anniversary. So that's a tam, that's a reason. Then you have another kind of mitzvahs. Don't steal, it's not appropriate. Don't hurt, it's not appropriate. And if you hurt, what if you damage? A woman is pregnant, and what if you're out of work? And all of these different halachas that we learn in Parshas Mishpatim and elsewhere, they are also reasonable. So basically, the 2 kinds of mitzvahs, i.e. edus and mishpatim, fall into the category of mitzvahs that have reasoning. And he continues, the edus take the mitzvahs of testimony. Heina mitzvah shetameyem heim edus ois v'zikorin. These are mitzvahs whose reasoning are testimonial and ois v'zikorin. Ois means a sign, v'zikorin means a memorial. U'kamoi isur gid hanosha. The prohibition of the gid hanosha, that's the, how do you say gid hanosha in English? What?
It's filet mignon. The
Sainu, right. Isur sit gid hanosha, that's the word I was looking for. The Sainu, that part of you're not supposed to eat that part of the animal. Shenemra Baitam the Edus. The Torah gives us a reason why. Quote, Kinoga b'chaf Yeref Yaakov. Because when the angel wrangled with Yaakov, right, he touched that part of the body. So for whatever reason, that part of the body becomes forbidden for us to eat. So in other words, Moshe, why aren't you allowed to eat it? Because Hashem says in the Torah, because the angel did this to Yaakov, and he hurt that part. That's why the Gid Anosha becomes forbidden. Let's say mitzvah sukkah. What's the reason for sukkah? Hatam. The reason is leman, quote, leman yedu deir seichem, so that your generation in the future shall know. Ki basukah says shafti is b'nei Yisrael, that I settled you Jews in tents. When I took them out of Egypt. So again there, we put up a sukkah today as a testimony to what Hashem did for us several thousand years ago by putting up tents in the desert. Right? Another mitzvah, a mitzvah Shabbos. The mitzvah of keeping Shabbos, Shetayim Aliyah Isa Ois. You see, remember he said three things, that they're Eidus, Ois, and Zikaron. Did you guys get that? Baruch. The Rebbe is not wasting words. He says Eid is a testimony, Ois is a sign, Zikaron is a memorial. So first he gave us a few examples of Eidus, of testimony. Right? Now he talks about a sign, an Ois. Which mitzvah does he pick for an Ois? Shabbos. Or mitzvah Shabbos, Shetayim Aliyah Ois. Shabbos is a sign, as it says, V'shamru b'nei Yisrael is a Shabbos, the Jews will keep the Shabbos, Las is a Shabbos, they'll make the Shabbos, L'doyre Yisrael for generations, but Yisraelim an everlasting covenant. Yes, Moshe?
Yeah, I just want to clarify, again, all these mitzvahs we're talking about right now, we're talking about Eidus, right?
Yes. We're talking about Eidus, correct. So he says, Hashem says, Beini Yuvein B'nei Yisrael. We say, those that say V'shamru, Chabad has it in the Siddur, but we don't say V'shamru, but the verse is still popular and correct and important. It's an Ois. So we call it's a sign, Beini Yuvein B'nei Yisrael, between myself and the Yidden. Ois Hi Li'olam. Ois. It's a sign. So too, let's look at mitzvah tefillin. Shetayba he ois, right? The reason for tefillin is it's an ois. It's also a sign. That's why Shabbos you're not allowed to put on tefillin. Why? Because since Shabbos itself is an ois, a sign, you don't need another ois. And if you don't need another ois, putting on another ois like tefillin on Shabbos is muktzah. So you're in violation of Shabbos. It's not only that if I want, I put on tefillin. If I don't want, I don't because I have a sign. No, you're actually forbidden because since it's not necessary, because you have already the ois of Shabbos itself, putting on tefillin is muktzah. The item becomes not non-essential for Shabbos. So it's muktzah. It's designated for a non-essential use, and therefore using it is not appropriate. And the Rebbe says, and so too, regarding other mitzvahs, which are all under the classification known as testimony edus. Now he goes, Moshe, to the next group. V'yesh mitzvah shetaimeyan. Then there's a group of mitzvahs whose reasoning is mishpatim, law. Not edus, but law. And he explains. Hainu mishpotei aseichel. What does mishpatim mean? The dictates of logic. In other words, celebrating an event that's historic, or an anniversary, or an ois, it's logical, but it's not the dictates of logic. In other words, it makes sense to commemorate an event that was done to you that's important, right? Okay, but that's not the what he calls here mishpatei haseichel. There's no logic. There's no details of logic. And let's look, for example, what does he mean by mishpatei haseichel? So he says, Geneva, for example, Geneva, ugzela, stealing, robbing, uritzicha, and murder. But loisese, these are in the mitzvahs loisese, don't do. V'kibud avoim, and then you have respecting your parents, v'avas reim, and loving friends. B'mitzvahs asay, those would be two examples of mitzvahs asay. V'chein kama min ha-mitzvahs aseichel mechayavim, and so too many other mitzvahs that logic obligates and dictates their correctness and importance. And the gam im loy hoya nitna Torah, these type of mitzvahs, Yoni, that are called mishpatim, are such that were the Torah not to give us those mitzvahs, hine haseichel mechayav oisam, logic would obligate them shetzorach liyaskein, that there needs to be so. Respecting parents makes sense. V'hainu, the taimon hu haseichel. This means that their reasoning is the logic. The reasoning for the mitzvah is inherent and is because of its seichel. K'maimar haseinu zal, as the rabbis say, the sages say, Gemara native, in a famous Gemara quote, if Torah were not to be given, we would learn modesty michatul, from a cat, v'gozel, and robbery minamola, from the gezel, and robbery from an ant. The zois hi michayvos shel adam. This is obligatory on behalf of man. Man is, as we learned in the earlier Maamar, he is by very nature, his very essence and nature is logic, is seichel, right? So, v'hasichli, hinitzorich li'islamid b'kol davar. Logic and someone who, and man, which is by default inherently logic, must learn from every experience. V'hainu, the mikol davar she'odem roya. This means from everything that man sees. Oy shemeya, or hears, tzorich li'islamid mizeh eize inyan. He needs to learn something from it. It's not just happenstance and non-essential to a person's life. Rather, there's a lesson in what you hear and what you see. This is true whether it be in acquiring virtuous deeper understanding of issues. When you hear something and see something and you think about it, you now have acquired more seichel and you have more logic to use. Let's continue on the next page, 282. Over midas toivos, and the information that you see or hear, not only does it help you baruch with your seichel, but it also helps you with your good behavior, your good midas. And also, it also helps you, it helps you distance yourself from the false deos, the false attitudes. And it helps you remove disgusting and ugly midos. So what he said is that basically seichel is so powerful and so important that seichel helps you discern between what's good and bad, what's ugly and what's nice, and in many other areas. He goes back to a point that we learned a few earlier in different Maamarim, that we could learn from animals. If you look at the scolding of the prophet Yeshayahu, quote, Yoda shoir konehu, an ox knows its master. V'chamoir evos biolav, and the chamoir that's in the trough knows the owner who provided the trough for the donkey to drink from. Nevertheless, Israel, the Jews, lo yoda, they did not know me. They do not know me. Ami, my nation, lo yizboinen, didn't meditate upon Hashem. The animals, the Navi says, look how the animals know and are thankful to their master, because they know their master gives them water and food and shelter. And you Jews who are so superior to the animal, nevertheless, you didn't take the time to meditate and reflect on the greatness of Hashem. This is part of the scolding that, the beginning of the scolding of the Haftarah of Shabbos Chazayin before Tisha B'Av. Upeidish Rashi comes along with Rashi over there in Yeshayahu, and he explains the Hasher Yoda Keineyu Misaktoi B'Charisha Bayoy. How is it, Moshe, that the animal, the ox, knows its master? Because the master, Misaknoi, prepares it, B'Charisha Bayoim, gives it plowing during the day. And while it plows, it eats. And since the master accustoms the ox to plow, Yodeya boy, so he knows that there's someone who every day will give him this opportunity to plow the field. Abul Chamoir Otum. I take that back. The ox knows its master just by the fact that it plows, not by eating. Why do I say that? Because look a line further. Abul Chamoir Otum. A chamoir is verstopped, clogged, jaded. Just from walking the donkey, it won't recognize it has a master. Eina me'evim ba'olov. The donkey doesn't know, Yoni, its master, achi yachilenu, until its master gives its food in the trough. And nevertheless, the Yisrael Yidden leinispakach leidakasher. They haven't clevered themselves, they haven't smarted themselves to know Hashem, their master, like the ox does. And even when I've called them my nation, Ami, they're my nation. You would think when the Yidden hear that they're called my nation, they would jump. Nevertheless, B'nai Yisrael leis beininu. They did not think about this and meditate. That's one interpretation. Says the Rebbe now, a second interpretation of HaPerush Hasheni. The second explanation is the Hashoir v'Chamoir, that the ox and the donkey einam poirikim ulam. They don't remove their yoke, B'Charisha, while they're plowing, uvemasa, and while they're carrying the load. Why? Because of the decree that God decreed upon them. You're an ox, you plow, you wear that yoke, and do your job. And they say, yes, sir, yes, boss, I am your slave to work. And the donkey says, I will carry your heavy packages, put them on me. So what do we emphasize here, Yoni? That they're not poetic oil. They don't reject the yoke. In other words, what do they have? The opposite, Kabbalah's oil. They accept the yoke. Let's continue. Ve'einam mishanim es tafkidam. Another Moshe great aspect of these animals, and I think all animal lovers in Ramat Bet Shemesh should be learning these things because they'll find out so much more about their animals. And maybe instead of having a dog, they'll get themselves a donkey. Anyway, another quality to these animals is they don't change and divert from their tafkid, from their mission and their purpose. That God instilled naturally in them, shlep, sweat. They don't say, Hashem, I'm sick and tired of what you gave me. I don't want to schlep anymore. I don't want to work hard. They don't do that. Hashoir lo'il, the ox is made for the yoke, v'chamoir, and the donkey is made lemasa for the load. They accept their purpose and their mission. Nevertheless, man is otherwise. Man doesn't accept what God placed on him, but rather changes his purpose, and he doesn't fulfill his obligation. Says the Rebbe, the whole zeh, all of what we just said, this is included in what man has to derive and learn from animals as well. So you see, Moshe, someone walking down the block with a donkey, it should remind you that if this donkey is schlepping the packages and it's schlepping the packages, am I schlepping Hashem's packages? And if you see, Baruch, as you take your family for a nice ride out to a kibbutz or to a nice place, and you see oxen running in the road, so you say, get out of the way. Instead you say, there's a message that we see an ox here. An ox has a yoke on it, a muzzle, so that when it does charisha, it does the plowing, and it does it. Kabbalah soil. So the Rebbe says, this is what Adam tzarich lehislamed game balichayim. So he goes back to his point, veheim mishpetei haseichel. These all fall into the dictates of logic. Hamachrichim es ha'adam, which kind of force man l'kaima mitzad haseichel. These mitzvahs are dictated by logic. And if you're logical, and we are logical because we are creatures of logic, we fulfill these mitzvahs because it makes sense. And when we Yidden were commanded about these mitzvahs, hey mitzvah, the mitzvah, utzlichem l'kaimam liyosa mitzvah, and we need to fulfill them because it's a commandment. The point he's making now is very important. So why should I do the mitzvah? That's logical, Moshe. Because it's logical? No. Because we were commanded. Although it also makes a lot of sense, that's not the reason we do the mitzvah. We do the mitzvah because we were commanded. Look at the words. V'tzrichem l'kaimon liyosam mitzvah. Yoni, not because it makes sense. Whether it makes sense or not to you is only dessert. Okay? But the essential reason for doing it is because it's God's command. However, these two groups of mitzvahs, again, number one, the Eidus, and number two, the Mishpatim, Heina mitzvahs the Eidus, Heina mitzvahs the Mishpatim, mitzvahs shel tam hema. They are all fall into one category, the category being mitzvahs associated with logic and reason. And he just repeating himself again, in a way. Although their reasoning is different for each. Nevertheless, Harishneim Bali Tam, both are reasons that's received and understood by the human intellect. Finished talking about Eidus and Mishpatim. Now he goes on to the third group. Yesh mitzvahs hanikroyim chukim. Then we have a group of mitzvahs that are called chukim, statutes. She'ein aleim tam. They do not have reasoning. K'may tzitzis, shatnes, ufar aduma, u'k'may shekosuv, as it says in the Torah regarding para aduma, quote, zois chukas haTorah. This is the statute of the Torah. Why does the Torah say that? So the Rebbe brings now from Rashi. Because the Satan and the non-Jews of the world, they say to Yidden, Ma mitzvah zois. They say, like, what kind of mitzvah is this? There's no logic. A person is spiritually defiled, put a potion on him, and all of a sudden, abracadabra. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Umatan yeshbo. What reasoning is there for this mitzvah? Lefikach kosav b'chuka. That's why Hashem introduces the mitzvah of paraduma by first saying, Zois chukas haTorah. This is the statute of all of Torah. All of Torah falls under the category called chukah. Right? What should have been written? Baruch, you learned it in Chasidus, in the Maamar of the Alter Rebbe. It should have been written, Zos chukas hapara. Right? What does it speak about Moshe? In the beginning of Parshas Chukas, it speaks about the para aduma. So the verse should have said, this is the statute of the para. It doesn't say Zos chukas hapara. It says Zos chukas haTorah. Why? Because the paraduma is demonstrative, and it is an example of all these type of mitzvahs within the Torah, not just paraduma. And what is it? What type of mitzvahs are we talking about? Chukas, beyond logic. And what it tells you is that all these mitzvahs of shatnez, tzitzis, are similar to para aduma in the fact that it's a mitzvah that transcends and is beyond logic. And that's why it doesn't just say zos chukas hapara, which would be limiting it to the para aduma only, but rather zos chukas haTorah, that it's something that's for all of the Torah. Continuing inside. Hashem says it's a decree. You have no permission to think about it and argue. I said this is the way it is. Zehu. That's it. So how, Yoni, do we see this in the mitzvah of paraduma? He says, Ein hamesh b'tamei. Remember, we quoted this in an earlier Maamar, and I love the first part of this quote. It is not the corpse that defiles. Ve'ein hamikveh mitaher. And it's not the mikveh that purifies. Right? You think you jump into a mikveh, you come out, hey, I'm a holy roller. You think the mikveh did it? Or when you touch a corpse, you become defiled. You think the corpse did it? Rather, it's the God within the corpse, and it's the God within the mikveh that says, get into a mikveh, or don't touch a corpse. And when you listen to Hashem, in both instances, you receive the tumah, or you're purified from the tumah. Elexeda Gazarti, I made a decree. Chuka Chakakti, a statute I made. Viata Yochel Avar Exedoisi, and you're not allowed to desecrate my decrees. What time is it now? I don't have the time here.
2:36, Rabbi.
Okay. V'hainu dechlolis ha-mitzvah shem chukim. This means that the overall category of mitzvahs, which we call statutes, einam al piatam, are not logical. Rak kach is gozra l'tzoyne v'chochmas yizborich. Rather, so decreed Hashem in His will and wisdom. V'yadua dechlolis ha-mitzvah shem p'chinas rotzen ha'elyin. And it's known that the overall mitzvahs are the will of the supernal, are God's supernal will. Dahainu, this means shesharsha bebchinas keser. Mitzvahs, Yoni, are rooted in what we call the crown of Hashem, the keter. Just like the crown, Yoni, is on top of the Torah scroll, right? It's above. That's how high mitzvahs are. They touch the crown, metaphorically speaking, of Hashem. V'hamitzvahs shehein b'bchinas chukim, and the mitzvahs that are called and associated with the group called statutes, chukim, harein b'bchinas keser shebekeser. Did you ever hear that, Baruch? They touch the crown within the crown, right? The crown are all mitzvahs. That's the will, the supernal will of God. And the group of mitzvahs that doesn't have logic, and yet you do them, and because Hashem said so, it's called chukim. They're the keser shebekeser, the crown within the crown. Dehine oraisa mechochma naftis. The Torah, HaTorah, is derived from God's knowledge. The Rebbe says that phrase, that idea, that Torah is taken from the knowledge of God, does not mean to imply that Torah is limited to knowledge. Because we just learned, because Torah's is rooted in something that's above knowledge, which is the crown. A little Kabbalah and Chasidus here, so hang in. In Keser, there are 10 emanations. Quote, Keser shebekeser, Chochma shebekeser, Bina shebekeser, Ad Pchinas Malchus shebekeser. You know that we just finished Sfiras HaOmer, but we didn't say Keser shebechochma. We dealt with what? And we didn't even do Chabad, right? We did Chesed shebechesed, Gvura shebechesed. We took the 7 midos, 7 times 7. Did you notice that we didn't do Chabad within each other? And surely we didn't do what's above Chabad, the crown? Right, we didn't. But the truth is, there is also each of the 9 spheros within Keser, each of the 10 spheros within Keser as well, and within Chabad for sure. But it's a different analysis, because the purpose of Sfiras HaOmer is to refine the character. So we were interested in Chesed Shebegvura and Gvura Shebechesed. The time, the 49 days between Pesach and Shavuos is not about refining your intellect. It's about refining your midos. So that's why we didn't speak about Chabad at that time. Did you ever think about it, guys? You probably never did. But now you'll know for the rest of your life. Remember, you learned it this morning. I'm not joking. It's a very serious thing. I mean, to say serious. It's very important to understand what you're doing, Sfiras HaOmer. Yes, Moshe.
So I was going to say, I Dafka, some time ago, I noticed that the 7 midos we discuss on Sfiras HaOmer have to do with the emotional attributes as opposed to the Chacham Bina V'das.
So you did. So you're ahead of me. Baruch Hashem. But what we're saying here, Moshe, is that there's also these 10 in the keser, in the crown. The keser is above the intellect. So we have three things. Yoni, we have a crown, we have a cup, and we have a heart. Midos, seichel, and the crown represents what we call rotzen, the willpower. And within the willpower, there is the willpower as it's oriented towards chesed, the willpower as it's oriented towards gevura. I mean, it's another discussion for another time. There is a book by Rabbi Matis Cantor, a phenomenal book, The 10 Keys to Understanding. I think I mentioned it in the early days of our kollel, which he goes through a psychological study of the 10 spheros. It's a phenomenal work because it really gives you food for thought in kind of Western ideas. Endurance, sadness, all of the different emotions and issues. So it would be worthwhile if you get a hold of it, 10 keys of understanding or 10 keys to understanding. And it could be, you could get it, either in Heichel Menachem, I doubt it, or maybe in Kahus, or maybe online, but it's a very, very good product. I know Rabbi Cantor, and he's a very bright man, and he wrote a phenomenal work, The 10 Keys to Understanding. But again, whether he covers the 10 spheros as they are in Keser, I'm not sure. You have to look there. Okay, let's go back to the text. So he says in Keser there's Chochma shebekeser until Baruch Malchus shebekeser. The Keshem shebechochma yeshesh spheres. Just as within Chochma there are 10 emanations from the crown, Mea Keser Ad Malchus till royalty. K'moikein b'Keser, in Keser itself, Yesh Gam Kein Eser spheres, there are 10 emanations. Ma Keser Ad Malchus, from Keser to Malchus. Now here come, when we talk about the Torah, he b'pchinas chochma shebekeser. What would Torah be? It would be the wisdom, the chochma within Keser. Hanikras chochma stima. This is Baruch what we see in Chasidus and in Kabbalah. And Yoni, you hear this term? Chochma stima. The closed, satum. The closed chochma. Vehi pchinas tam komus. This is the esoteric reason when we say there is in Kabbalah and Chasidus, you'll see sometimes a term, Yoni, called tam komus. It's not just there. Sometimes it's used also in writing and language. What's the reason? Okay, I'll give you an example. In the early 90s, Rabbi Lazar or Rabbi Kagan from Russia wanted to build a mikveh in the city of Lubavitch. Moshe, when you went to Eretz Yisrael with the Sefer Torah, did you go to Lubavitch or you never made it to Lubavitch?
No, we were only in the Ukraine.
In Ukraine, okay. Okay. Anyway, to Lubavitch, people, want to go to as well. Especially today, they're fixing it up, but even back in the 90s. But there was no mikveh. And, before you go into a tzaddik, because the Tzemach Tzedek and the Rebbe Marash, two Lubavitcher Rebbes, number 3 and number 4 of the dynasty, are buried there. You want to go to the mikveh before, and it's a very long trip from Moscow. It's 7-8 hours. So they wanted to build a mikveh, and probably they had the funding for it because, people liked to, wanted to support that. Anyway, the Rebbe said 2 things. One he said is, who's going to take responsibility for the kashrus of the mikveh? Baruch, wake up. Who's going to take the kashrus? And it was such a... Rabbi Lazar told us this December. I was in Moscow, and he made a Shema Bracha Sunday morning in his house. It was beautiful around the table, very nice. And he told us a few things. So he said, the Rebbe said, who's going to take the achrayus? Like Rabbi Lazar was going to bring out a proper Rav to authorize the mikveh. That's what the Rebbe said. The second thing the Rebbe said is, mitam komus etzli. He used these words. An esoteric reason that I have, I don't think there should be a mikveh. There's no mikveh till today in Lubavitch. So on the way to Lubavitch, people that want a mikveh, they stop in Smolensk, which is 40 minutes outside of Lubavitch. There's a mikveh there. Shliach built a mikveh. They go to the mikveh and they go on to Lubavitch. So I just reminded myself when I read the words Tam Komus to put it in a context, and I just had that the Rebbe said Mikam Komus. It's an esoteric reason that I have, and I don't want to share it with you. He's saying clearly it's something private. So why are we learning it over here in the Maamar? Because Chochmas Timo, when a person experiences this level of Chochmah, which he says is called the Keser, this is the idea of the esoteric reasoning. It's secretive. It's a secret. Tam Komus. Top of page 283. Shezeu lemayla mibchina seichel v'tam. Tam Komus transcends logic. Tam Komus, Yoni, doesn't mean to say that if you probe and probe, you'll come to a reason. No, Tam Komus means it's beyond reason. So it's not that the Rebbe was saying, the truth is I don't know. I don't know if the Rebbe meant to paraphrase Tam Komus, and he meant to say, I have a private reason why I don't want a mikveh there, and I don't want to share it with you. Or does he mean the Tam Komus, as it says on top of 283, that inherently it's esoteric? You hear the difference? The difference between the two ways of using Tam Komus. I want you to know this because you will hear this and you could use it. Someone asks you, she might say, I have a Tam Komus I don't want to tell you. The guy will look at you. Were you coming from Mars? What are you talking about? Tam Komus. Learn a little Chasidus. What does it mean? So what it really means, Yoni, what it really means is that this reason is beyond understanding. And who am I to say I'm such a big shot that I don't want to tell you something and I'm saying it's beyond understanding. You're beyond understanding. You're tzadrek. You're mixed up, you know. But when it's tzaddik, like the Rebbe says, Tam Komus, it's really Tam Komus. Again, whether the Rebbe meant it as a figure of speech, this is what I'm making my point. Whether he meant it as a figure of speech, which you could use, or literally as it says here, that this is by its essence, Keser, is beyond Seichel V'Tam. So don't try to explore. You're not, Hashem did not relegate it to the realm of logic. Rather, it's esoteric and secretive, i.e. Tam Komus. What time is it? Is it 2:45?
That's the 3.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll stop here. Any questions? Any comments?
Yeah. I have a question, Rabbi.
Yes.
The idea of a hook is that a Tam Komus? Is there an example of a Tam Komus?
What?
In other words,
Yes. That would be an example of a Tam Komus. Yes. I also wanted to say, Moshe, I was thinking about people in Eish Kodesh and Ramat Bet Shemesh and Yoni and Yershu. The first part of this Maamar, until we get to the stuff that we're learning now, that's a little Kabbalistic, it's so important and it's so easy for people to understand and to learn with them. I want to ask you guys, you Gaboyim and Shuls, how many of the congregants in your shul, and they're pretty much all from, understand that there's 3 categories of mitzvahs and the details that we learned? I'm asking, how much percentage would you say?
Very few.
In your shul?
Very few.
Moshe, in your shul?
So in Eish Kodesh, most people I think would know it. However, they would know about. They would know very much about
The 3 categories.
About mishpatim and chukim. Edus already they would know, but not I think to the extent of what the Maamar is discussing.
So So you see, certain Maamorim they melt in your mouth, and they're made for the masses. So, you have a friend, you say something, come, let's sit down, and the Rebbe said many times, say it, you don't need to say it in my name, you don't need to say even the source. If you know the person, as soon as he hears the word Chasidus, he's going to run the other way, then don't tell him it's Chasidus. I'm saying, I don't think the people that are that way, most of the people are not that way, because the others are not going to want to learn with you for whatever reason. But the people who are more open, you take out a Maamar like this, and you learn the first part, they'll eat it up, and it's not that you're doing that. I want to say this. It's not that you're doing it because I want to learn with you Chasidus, and you should understand what Chasidus is. That's the wrong way to go about it. I want you to understand the Torah, the Holy Torah. And I happen to find in this section a nice explanation for this area in Torah. Now, you have another nice area in Mesilas Yesharim, or in another Sefer of Musar or Chasidus or Gemara. Let's sit and learn. It shouldn't be, this versus that, because this is where we lose people, and it's not Torah. This whole idea, it's not Torah. I'm going to enforce upon you learning Chasidus. When the Rebbe encouraged the Toldos Aaron Rebbe in 1963, he came to see the Rebbe. In general, you should know, as a principle, when Rebbes and Rabbonim came to the Rebbe, you could say like the number one thing that he wanted from them is they should share and teach and Chasidus in their Moiset. Now, of course, more this was with the Hasidic Rebbes. So when the Toldos Aaron Rebbe came, he spoke to him about it. So one way of looking at this is, the Rebbe's he's a Chassid, he's a Lubavitcher Rebbe from the Lubavitcher dynasty. So there is this issue of, and you all know that many non-Lubavitchers, and maybe I would say most non-Lubavitchers, feel that Lubavitch are always trying to make them learn Hasidus. Right? Have you heard that? Hundreds of times, right? Why when I come to a Breslov, I don't know how it's a Breslov, maybe Breslov today it's also this way, but it used to come to bells. No one's trying to indoctrinate you with bells. Again, today it's changed. Everyone has their party, but Lubavitch, everyone felt, here we go. He's trying to teach me Tanya. He wants me to start thinking like a Lubavitcher and all of that. You've heard this, I'm sure, Moshe Myers and Er Shemeach and Er Torah hundreds of times. And the truth is that the teachers of Chasidus, though, and the Amad Dabar, the average balabos in a yeshiva or in a shul, is not sensitive and doesn't have the background and the know-how to do in this whole arena. I once met at the Gaivid. The Gaivid is the Rav Rashi, kind of the Eida Charedis in Yerushalayim. And I was once in that area, next to where Rachma Strifke has its big building, and his yeshiva, and in a building adjacent there, he had a minyan in the apartment building, and it was a packed minyan. And I met there a grandson of a Rebbe Shef family, and he himself is a businessman, a very successful businessman. He lives in Manhattan, actually, and I met him there. And I knew that he learned by Mashpia while he lived in Crown Heights. He learned Chasidus with him. So he told me, so I asked him, because I always like to hear about my Mashpia, different things. So he said, I learned with him, he taught me Lekutei Sichos, the Rebbe's Sichos. We learned the Rebbe's Sichos, and he enjoyed it. So I asked him, tell me. So he says, I want to tell you something. You know what your Mashpia's genius is? And he says, I saw this when he learned with me every week. It's not in what he said, it's in what he didn't say. He knew what not to say. That's the genius. A teacher of Chasidus needs to know what to say, what not to say. I'm talking about when you're not. Now I'm teaching you. You know what I mean? We're all in the same arena. But when you're going outside of your arena and you want to share a new idea, you have to go about it in a objective way, not in a subjective way. And I promise you, you'll have so many more people that will ask you, teach me Chasidus, tell me these ideas. What are they about? How does Chasidus differ than Musar? What's the advantage? What's the disadvantage? You know, etc., etc. So this Maamar, I'm saying all this because this Maamar, as I was teaching it to you, lends itself to a format of teaching, of learning that's parif. In other words, if this wasn't in this sefer that we're learning from, you wouldn't even know it's Chasidus. That's my point. So, as you know, that's why I try to choose my Maamar that have a broader appeal, because, like the Rebbe said to Professor Dimitrovsky, who was at the time at JTS, and he was Orthodox, and he was a Litvak, and he felt like, what am I doing here? He needed Parnasa, but at the same time, they were eliminating parts of Shmon Esrei about the Karbonas and Mashiach. So he went to the Rebbe, and I interviewed him, and I asked him, you're a Litvak, why did you go to the Rebbe? He said, listen, Reb Moshe Feinstein was around, but he's a Litvak and a Poisek. He's going to give me a ruling. I'm not allowed to be there. What am I doing there? The Satmar Rebbe is an extremist. Well, I'm going to go to him. The only person that I found that would be parif and neutral is the Lubavitcher Rebbe, because he has a broad vision. And you know what the Rebbe told him, Moshe Myers? The Rebbe told him, you are not to leave JTS until Professor Saul Lieberman leaves JTS. Saul Lieberman was the Rosh Hashiva. And he was Orthodox. He was a frum Jew. And the Rebbe told him, and he told me this, don't leave. So he said to the Rebbe, why not? So he said, because you and Saul Lieberman and such people who are Shomer Shabbos are the lifeline for the students to hopefully follow and learn the Torah the right way. Because the other professors are not Shomer Shabbos and they're teaching heresy. And you and Lieberman are amongst the only ones who are teaching the Torah the right way. So you are not to leave. Now, why am I telling you this? Story within story. Because the students who listen to a shiur are there to take it out to the masses. So I choose my Maamar that lend themselves to share with others in a non-threatening way. This is all an advertisement. You got it? Clear?
Yeah.
Couldn't say it any clearer, right? No, but no. I'm telling you, if you follow Moshe, if you follow this rationale and approach, all of these issues, I'm not going to say all. Listen, if someone is a hater and wants to, you won't be able to change his opinion. And I have a guy who's been emailing me from Flatbush. I spoke 3-4 weeks ago on the internet. I get a clip. I do some clips. So I spoke about a certain event that I heard, and it was a story that made someone look bad. But I didn't position it that way, and I smoothed it out. But, someone with brains could figure out what's going on over here, okay? So a guy heard it, and he called me, he sent me an email, and he called me, and he says, I ask you, please take that off. He says, I'm a misnagid, and, the reasoning that you gave for A, B, and C could be turned around, and we could argue otherwise. And I said, yes, you could. So he says, if you could, why should we take the way you positioned it and walk away with something negative that our Rosh Hashiva did, it's just not right. I said, fine, I'll take it off. And I took it off YouTube. That's it. It's gone. Because it brought one Jew to feel no good.
Yeah.
Right? But since then, he's been emailing me with negativity, with Litvish, Misnagdish negativity every few days. And I told him, I got to work, my friend. I don't have any time for this. Get a job, get a life. And he said, he calls me a friend because, but I say, let go already. And he sent me clips of the Shach speaking about the Rebbe. And he sends me this and that, all the Litvish stuff that I've heard for 40 years, the rhetoric and everything. And he sent me, and I said, you trying to convince me I'm a Lubavitcher? You ain't going to convince me. And he says I'm a Misnagid, so I'm not convincing you. No problem. I did what you wanted. You asked me to take it off. Another person would not take it off. He would say, go somewhere. I took it off. Why? Because I felt if there's one Jew that's distanced because of it, it's not worth to be online. Okay? And I took it off. But yet, you keep on harassing me and sending me emails, with see this clip and that clip and this and that. Like, get over it. So such people, you're never going to win over, right? Until they themselves...
Like
that guy. But if they themselves have an experience... I'll tell you another story. I don't want to say who, because you'll recognize the name. I spoke Sunday to a Rav who lived in Yerushalayim, an author for Art Scroll, a prominent person, probably in his 80s already. And he tells me, could you find me more stories with the Rebbe? And I'm listening to this. He lives now in Lakewood. And I say, Rabbi, why do you want more stories of the Rebbe? He says, because the Rebbe is such a tzaddik, and these stories, they help me at my emunah, and this is an 80-plus-year-old man who went through the Litvish system, who writes for Art Scroll, and he's telling me this Sunday from Lakewood, New Jersey. He left. He had to leave because of health. He left Eretz Yisrael. So I say to him, what happened here that you became a fan of the Lubavitcher Rebbe? So he says, I became in Yerushalayim a chassid of the Tolna Rebbe. And the Tolna Rebbe speaks, and there's writings how he lauds the Rebbe in so many ways that if it's good for my newfound Rebbe, it's good for me. And in other words, and then he tells me, listen to this, he tells me his father-in-law, who I'm not going to mention who it was, one day you'll find all this out if you read. He says his father-in-law was so against Chabad that he has a journal of all the negative things he said about Chabad. He told me this Sunday. He has a notebook that he wrote down because he was so anti-Lubavitch so years ago, he told me. And today he's a lover of Lubavitch. Could you imagine? How? Because when a person goes through a personal crisis of sorts, or is inspired by someone, and that someone looks at another someone as a great person, so then you say to yourself, like we learned a few days ago, last week in the Maamar, I've been walking around with a mistake for so many years. Although I'm a rabbi, and I'm litvak, and I'm an author, and I'm a big man, but in this area, I'm a fool. A big fool. And only someone who could say that in their 80s goes into Gan Eden after 120 with a peace and tranquility, and won't need to go through a process to wipe away the animosity and hate that existed in that person's life, because he's cleansed it already. And again, we're talking about spiritual ideas, but it's al pi Torah, because the Torah talks about it. When you have hate in your heart, or animosity, or jealousy, and you pass on that way, you need a very good cleansing, because your neshama can't rest until it's cleansed. So why wait till it goes into Gehenna before it goes to Gan Eden? Do it now. And do tshuva. And the same I would say to a Lubavitcher who has hate to a Misnagid. And I want to tell you, and I'm telling you this, it's on Facebook, but I'll say it anyway. Growing up in yeshiva, we had also hate and animosity to Misnagdim. And as I grow, and as I write, and as I study, it's lessened and almost dissipated. It doesn't mean to say I can't have a good joke about a Misnagid, or like a Misnagid could have a good joke about a Chassid. Joking is fine, but there's a time to joke, and there's a time not to joke. You understand? In other words, to become like, it reminds me, I'm just going on here. It reminds me that Purim, in Batei Ran, the Nachlaot, there's a section called Batei Ran. You guys know the Ran Shul? Next to it is a shul called the Breder Shul. The Breder's Ashkenaz and Litvak going back, way back, and Ran goes back 100 years with Mendel Rand, who was a Hungarian chassid. So what was the joke that they did on Purim? I heard this from people living there. They would run into the Breder Shul, the guys from Ran, the Hasidim, and they would scream out, "V'yatzvach perkane v'karnev mishiche." That was their way of getting back at the Litvaks on Purim. That's acceptable. That's acceptable. It's Purim, you know. Yes, we say Yatzvach perkane v'karnev, you don't, so we're laughing at you, and you can laugh at us, you know. There is an acceptable way of saying we're different, we have different customs. That's fine.
Good taste and bad or poor taste.
What?
Either can be said in good taste or in poor taste.
Exactly. So you know, I see in myself, and I'm amazed, frankly, because you know I'm a passionate person, and you know, and the knowledge, and I understand that it's not just. I understand what a litvak is. It's not that it's not just, butter, mayonnaise, butter and mayonnaise and margarine, You're talking about, I understand what the Alter Rebbe Shita came to bring to the world. And when you understand it, you say, wow, how could it be that the whole world is not following this ideology? But nevertheless, there's people who, for whatever reason, don't. So we have to train ourselves to feel this. And when you do, you're able to be in Rabbi Malinowitz's shul, asked to give a Tanya Shir, and to speak from the podium on Gimel Tammuz, not once, but twice. I'll never forget this. It was Gimel Tammuz Shabbos 2 or 3 years ago when I was in Bet Shemesh, right, for the summer in 2018. And I asked Rabbi Malinowitz in memory of the Rebbe, could I say a few words? He said, sure. Then he calls me back as Rabbi Dalfin. Not only should I want you to say at the second minyan, I want you to come early and speak at the first minyan. So I told Rabbi Linowitz, I take a car, it's a problem. He says, you work it out. Get here, I want you to speak by both minyanim. And I did. And Rabbi Linowitz was not a chassid. And he trusted and believed, I'm sure Rabbi Shach, But nevertheless, he was makir. The Rebbe was a big tzaddik. Today is his yard site. And what he saw in me is that I don't have an agenda. I don't have an agenda. I'm going to share words of the Rebbe. You asked me to share words of the Rebbe. I'll share, and with my full beard and all the regalia and everything else. You can't make a mistake thinking that I'm a Tolna Chassid or a Litvak or a Sephardic guy. You see me, guys. You know exactly who I am and what I am. And he says, come into my shul with all the Bnei Torah, because we develop a relationship that's based on emes. And when you develop, and this Maamar is a tool to share this with the world. Okay, we verbringt. Have a great day, everybody. Sei gesund. Hatzlacha. Bye.
See you tomorrow.
Take care.
Go ahead. Go ahead.